Kiyosashi made a sharp lunge to stab Agatha in the chest, but she successfully deflected it. Kiyosashi tried to stab her in the head a second time, but Agatha managed to dodge. The creature didn't stop and immediately tried to kick her. Agatha was able to understand this predictable move almost immediately, and she parried the blow with her foot. Her punch was so strong that Kiyosashi flew back, making a 360-degree turn. Agatha could barely contain her smile at this slightly comical picture. But the enemy was able to recover quickly and immediately rushed headlong into the attack. Agatha deftly sidestepped and aimed her fist at the creature's leg, but the fist of Kiyosashi, who was rushing past, parried her blow. Kiyosashi managed to raise his arm to block Agatha's casual lunge aimed at the back of his head. However, due to the clumsiness of the attack, he found himself in the path of a huge geyser, and the creature had to soar up sharply to avoid crashing into it. Which led him straight to Agatha, who rose up to strike at him. Kiyosashi swung at the Kraken's fist and dodged the blow again. He rolled over Agatha's back, getting behind her. Kiyosashi turned his head back in time to see the huge blue heel of one of Agatha's feet in front of him. She slammed her foot into his head, and Kiyosashi fell down. But he managed to group in flight, land on the bottom without losing his balance, and soar back to the Kraken. He managed to tear off a medium-sized underwater geyser from the bottom and, trying to use it as a club, struck Agatha with incredible speed. She barely managed to cover her face with her hands. The force of the impact was such that it would have been enough to destroy a human submarine.
Wow,
she said with a short laugh.
This tadpole still has some powers.
After his weapon shattered into thousands of small pieces on Agatha's skin, Kiyosashi launched a large-scale offensive. Oh yes, he was very energetic. He began to throw a wave of punches at her with great speed, hoping to hit Agatha, but his punches were accidental and therefore inaccurate. Meanwhile, Agatha, with the grace inherent in a princess on the ball, continued to beat off his every blow. His attacks were so random and his strategy so predictable that she could barely contain herself from yawning. All she had to do was sway from side to side and occasionally make sharp lunges to give herself a few seconds to rest. Agatha was in full control of the battle and could have continued to play out this performance for many more hours. However, her first priority was to save her sister. Therefore, although it was a lot of fun to play with this creature, Agatha decided that the comedy was over. It's time to show this freak what happens when you mess with a giant Kraken. She made a series of lightning-fast lunges at Kiyosashi's legs to make the creature soar above her, and thus give Agatha the opportunity to break its spine with one strong blow. And this plan was so clearly in front of Agatha's eyes that she almost lost sight of the real drawing of the battle. Kiyosashi reflected her every blow, almost without losing the perfect balance. He never moved a millimeter more than necessary, deflecting attacks without the slightest effort, delivering lightning strikes and thrusts faster than the claws of a mantis crab. Suddenly, Kiyosashi made a sharp lunge and his fist aimed straight at her chest. Agatha barely managed to dodge. The blow was too close. But by the time Agatha dodged, Kiyosashi struck again with such force that the shock of the fists colliding rippled through Agatha's arms. But as soon as she repelled this attack, Kiyosashi's black fist rushed towards his neck again. Only by making a desperate block, kicking Kiyosashi with a roundhouse kick in the thigh, Agatha was able to gain enough time to swim a little to the side. But when she barely caught her breath, he was already there. Agatha deflected the first blow with his fist from above instinctively. The second blow bent Agatha's wrist. The third blow bent Agatha's arm so hard that her own fist hit her shoulder, and Agatha had to step back again.
Stop, what?
Kiyosashi advanced confidently, weighing each blow. Agatha retreated as fast as she could. Kiyosashi did not lag behind. The Kraken princess's breathing became shallow and heavy. She no longer tried to block the creature's blows, but only deflected them to the side. The Kraken had to wastefully expend all its available strength just to fend off these attacks in order to somehow hold the defense. Each defense cost Agatha more strength than in the entire previous battle. Each quarter seemed to take up a year of her life, while Kiyosashi continued to attack, relentlessly, mercilessly. Only then did Agatha realize that she had been deceived like a little girl. The entire previous fight was just a ruse. All those stupid and senseless attacks by Kusisha were bait on the hook. And Agatha took the bait. Agatha lunged again, throwing punches. The princess's punch was strong enough to throw Kiyosashi off balance, giving Agatha the opportunity to swim away. The farce she was playing out suddenly, inexplicably, turned from funny to deadly serious and very quickly became terrifying. Understanding blossomed in Agatha's head. This ridiculous, lanky, big-headed creature, similar to a mutant toad, has somehow become absolutely and extremely dangerous. There's a chance that this freak, no matter how unimaginable, will be able to defeat her. For the first time in her life, she seriously came up with this strange thought.
Please, don't be rude, Your Highness, but your movements are too slow. You're too predictable. You need to try harder if you want to save your sister.
At that very moment, Agatha's mind became as clear as a crystal ball. The fog of fear dissipated as soon as she remembered what she was fighting for. Who she's fighting for. She's the only one standing between Kiyosashi and the one she loves the most in the world, and she has nowhere else to retreat to. The fire of hatred was rekindled in her eyes, and she was ready to continue the fight. But she knew it was time for her to change tactics. She sank to the bottom, and covered her skin with a layer of scaly material, tough as metal. This body armor could withstand any impact, and for a while Agatha had absolute protection. Bending her arms to her chest, she motioned for Kiyosashi. The creature did not keep her waiting long and attacked her. Agatha fended off the blow that came from above, with the sound of iron pipes hitting each other, and jumped back. Kiyosashi launched an attack again, but this time Agatha parried it with ease. They froze almost right next to each other, punches and counter-punches changing so fast that it was impossible to keep track. It wasn't like a fight, but a death dance in which neither side could gain an advantage. Although Agatha felt that her body armor provided her with sufficient protection, it also made her heavier and her punches were more sweeping and clumsy. Kiyosashi, on the other hand, was still fast and elusive, but his strength was not enough to penetrate the armor. Therefore, for a while there was parity between them, but only for a while. Because the two of them knew that no matter how limitless the body armor was, sooner or later Agatha wouldn't have the strength to keep it on herself. Sooner or later, fatigue will take over. Therefore, Agatha knew that she needed to defeat her opponent before that could happen. She jumped up from the bottom to be taller than the opponent and used the height as an advantage. However, Agatha had forgotten that the body armor added dozens of tons of weight to her weight. And although ladies, including among the Kraken, do not like it when they are hinted at being overweight, in this case Agatha would really like someone to tell her about it, because of these additional 20 tons of weight, her jump speed was twice as slow as usual. And when Agatha noticed this, she suddenly felt a sudden, unexpected, overwhelming and absolutely depressing bad feeling. But it was too late. While she was slowly getting up, Kiyosashi punched Agatha right in the stomach, causing her to double over. The sound of the impact was such that it reached the surface, where at that moment a small boat was sailing over the place in search of a fishing trawler that disappeared last night in the area. The captain of this vessel, an old sailor named Gordon Lighthouse, mistook the sound coming from the depths for the explosion of an underwater mine and hurriedly ordered the crew to turn around and leave the place. For Agatha, this blow was like a meteor falling. She felt that if it wasn't for her body armor, all her organs would have turned into a huge inedible mess that even Leviathan wouldn't want to eat. The pain was unbearable. Agatha thought that if it was hard for her, the strongest warrior in the Pacific Ocean, then what can we say about Jean, who had never fought at all? Agatha didn't have time to think anything else, because when her attention returned to Kiyosashi, a black smooth heel loomed in her field of vision, a monster that was approaching her face at high speed. The collision was so strong that Agatha flew back and her back painfully hit the underwater geyser. Black smoke poured out in all directions, and Agatha's armor completely collapsed. At that moment, Kiyosashi shot straight towards her like a torpedo. Agatha remembered her mother's words during one of their training sessions, that a warrior should fight honestly, but in extreme situations, a warrior is allowed to cheat a little. And this situation was more than extreme. Gathering her strength into a fist, she became invisible, which made Kiyosashi slightly surprised and did not have time to stop. In her invisible form, Agatha delivered a stunningly fast roundhouse kick to Kiyosashi's jaw, or what looked like his jaw. The monster crashed into the bottom at a steep angle, rolled along it for about a dozen meters and slammed into the stalagmite so hard that it collapsed on him. In an instant, a bright pink ray of energy shot out of her eyes, reaching its target in a second and exploding like a huge firework. But Kiyosashi was no longer there. He made a sharp dash and managed to get away from the projectile. Agatha saw this and flew into a rage.
I'm so tired of you.
She aimed and released another stream of energy, but it didn't reach the target either. However, Agatha wouldn't be Agatha if she just gave up. The rays darted across the gorge in random shots and exploded bright from hitting a rock or wall, while Kiyosashi remained unharmed. He didn't even try to attack, knowing that one hit would be enough to burn through his body. But he also knew that this energy was incredibly energy-consuming and that the Kraken would become weaker with every shot. Therefore, all he had to do was circle around Agatha and avoid being hit by projectiles. The creature seemed to be dissolving, then regaining flesh, being swallowed up by a thickening black haze, around which solar flares danced, destroying everything in their path. He was like a shadow, so inconceivably fast that Agatha felt like he was spreading out from the speed. It was only for a few moments that she managed to make out a pair of huge green eyes in this shadow, and what she saw in them amazed her more than its speed. There was nothing but absolute calm and peace in Kiyosashi's eyes. At that moment, Agatha lost. At that moment, when she looked at Kiyosashi's gaze for milliseconds through the flash from the explosion and realized that he had no anxiety, no anger, no fatigue from the fight. It was at this moment, when she realized that all her exhausting training, years of fighting, political influence, and diplomatic skills were useless, that she lost. Of course, Agatha is still standing on her feet and she has enough strength to continue to release rays of energy from her eyes. But this is just a futile attempt to delay the inevitable. And deep down, Agatha understands this. She understands that all this no longer makes sense, and her defeat is no longer even a matter of time, but a fait accompli that nothing can change. Even her incredible love for her sister, which kept her willing to fight, seemed to have used up its potential. The exhaustion from using the energy blurred her senses. Now she could barely feel the outline of the gorge. She could barely feel the wall behind her, the numerous fragments of geysers lying on the floor. And with each new salvo, she was getting worse and worse. Soon, Agatha could only see the gorge through a blurred, electrified glow. There wasn't even a shadow left of Kiyosashi. Now she could only know his location by the splashes of water he made when swimming. And at that moment Agatha began to hear how the sound from the splashes began to increase at an accelerated rate and became louder. She did not have time to react, as a powerful blow from Kiyosashi's fist flew into her face, from which she flew back, crashing into the wall of the gorge. Agatha was exhausted and couldn't move, and her body stopped glowing. But it seems the blow was able to restore her sense of reality, and she could see the world around her again. And the first thing Agatha saw in front of her were tiny dark blue bubbles slowly rising up. It was her blood coming out of her mouth. But Agatha herself did not immediately realize this, as the last time she saw her blood was at the age of 15, when she accidentally cut herself with a kitchen knife. Agatha watched as her own blood quickly flowed out and slowly dissolved into the depths of the sea, and she did not notice how this sight fascinated her. Over the years, she has bled her opponents without getting a single scratch. Everyone she knew, from family to acquaintances, claimed that she was invulnerable. Agatha herself, although she was more skeptical of such statements, still thought so herself to some extent. But now Agatha herself is bleeding, and she realized that this was another lie that she had forced on herself.
Princess Agatha, your reputation has not let you down. You really are the strongest warrior of the Pacific Ocean. It was a great honor for me to fight with you.
Kiyosashi bowed low as a sign of respect, but Agatha did not listen to his speech. Her consciousness was gradually leaving her, and the last thing she had time to think about before she completely blacked out was,
I have failed you, Jean. I am so sorry.